Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing well. It's awesome that we get to talk about public speaking. This is something that a lot of people, I would say, are very nervous about when it comes to communications, but we're going to look at this in a collaborative way. And I think based on what you're going to learn today in your practice, you're going to definitely improve. As a reminder, I am on page 237, chapter 7. So delivering a speech, you want to employ audience analysis, right? You want to get the general purpose of why you're delivering that speech, so understand what you're talking about per se. List the strategies for narrowing a speech topic. That's another thing we're going to learn. Compose audience-centered specific information, and then have a thesis statement. So analyze your audience. Who are you talking to in regards to when you have to deliver a speech? Like if I go into a classroom and I determine that I have a group of students that need to learn a certain amount of information about communication techniques, as an example. I'm going to talk about that and describe it in a way that's engaging. Now, it's going to be different than when I'm doing a lecture online, because a lecture online, students could pause, they could stop, they could take a break. But if it's in person, there's a little bit of a different dynamic there. So making sure you understand who you're speaking to and what engages them. And so moving on, you could do a psychological audience analysis. I don't want you to dig too deep into that, but it considers your audience's dispositions towards the topic. So if you're speaking to a group of people that don't agree with you per se, it's going to be a little bit harder to come at them in a very forceful manner. You want to craft your speech in a way that helps them understand you're there to try to get them to realize that there might be a difference in their thought process. So when you analyze your audience's behavior, this is a really interesting diagram that I think is going to be super helpful for you to think about. It's on page 240. It's psychological analysis about attitudes, beliefs, and values. Values are at your core, right? Values are what crafts your ideas and your attitudes. So it's a lot easier to change attitude. It's a lot harder to change values. That's when we're looking at a lot of these political, arguments that people have. Some of them are ingrained in values, and sometimes that can take a long time to change. So situational audience analysis is another thing that we can look at. It's on page 241. It considers the physical surroundings of the settings of the speech. So understanding where you're giving a speech at, what time of day, the size of the audience, what kind of room that you have, that's always important. Of course, this would also include virtual, right? Virtual public speaking. So the general purpose of, determining your purpose per se is, understanding how to persuade people or entertain people or maybe even inform people. It depends on what type of speech you're trying to give and why you're trying to give it. And I like the table on 7.1 that's listed here. It just kind of gives you some ideas when you're trying to persuade people how to talk about things, and then how to choose a topic, which is our next item. Choosing a topic, of course, would be how to brainstorm. So, you're looking at a topic, you want to talk about different, items that are illustrated in that specific topic. This gives you an idea of how to, look at things from a dynamic perspective of, which one and what things do I want to highlight in my speech. So narrowing down your topic is another way that this tries to, really, understand what you're trying to communicate. So that's on page 243. I don't want you to spend a ton of time on it. This just shows a way of narrowing, but it also shows a way of, hey, if you want to do a public speech on dogs, you can talk about different components of dogs. So, dog owning, dog buying, pet stores, shelters for dogs. There's a lot of things that go into that. I would, when you're crafting a speech, if you have to do this brainstorming technique, I would spend a little more time understanding your topic. You should have a flow, thinking about something before you go into a speech. So it shouldn't take this type of brainstorming, but if it does, I would study your topic a little bit more. What is your purpose? Like when you go into a speech, what is your purpose statement? So it's a one-sentence statement that includes the objective, what you want to accomplish in your speech. So sometimes that's listed on the first slide if you have a PowerPoint presentation. What is your objective? You see that in these PowerPoints. Your learning objectives are A, B, and C. So something to keep in mind. A thesis statement, you mostly see this in written communication, but it's a one-sentence summary of the central idea of your speech. It could be a central idea of your paper too. I wouldn't overburden and have a purpose statement and a thesis statement in your speech the entire time, but it's always important to highlight why you're there, and that's what this is trying to describe. So more learning objectives. Let's move quickly through this so we can get through this slideshow. Finding supporting material, very key. Where do you find information to deliver your speech? Where do you find information to deliver any type of research? Google Scholar is something that we're going to go over in the near future. It talks about, it's a library, it's an online library that you can link your school library to. You can find information that's scholarly, not just off of random websites. So remember, we don't use .com. We only can use .edu, .gov, and .org for our research. So lots of great information that we can find on the internet, and we'll have more information on how to find that type of stuff very soon. So this is just a research kind of continuum about how to conduct background research and how to find information that you need. So take a look at that in your spare time. Tons of sources, right? Newspapers, I would say absolutely not. When you're doing a scholarly speech or you're doing a scholarly review on a paper, you want to make sure that you're having peer-reviewed information. And this is talking about a speech that might not be on an academic level, but we're talking about academic level speeches and academic level papers, which is very important to realize the difference. Reference tools, we've already talked about that. More information to come here. Evaluating websites. We talked about .gov, .mil, military. You're not going to find a lot on there unless you're doing specific military research. edu.org, there's some information in there. .com, it's not something that you can use in scholarly. And we'll talk more as time goes on about that in future weeks. I'm going to move a little quickly through this information and find some other information that might be beneficial for you to realize in this first section. After you found the material you want to use, how do you incorporate it into your speech? So you incorporate it in a background of trying to prepare the audience of why, what you're thinking or what you're trying to persuade or what information you're giving is accurate. So you want to use it in a way that incorporates it, maybe a study or maybe something you found, on a scholarly review. A lot of times you'll see this on a PowerPoint slide, but if you want to mention it in your speech, that's also, I think, a positive thing to back up what you're trying to say. Your speech should look like you give an introduction, why you're there. We talked about thesis and purpose statement, and then you move on to the body of the speech where you talk about the nitty-gritty things that help flow through what you're trying to discuss. And we looked at dogs, right? So we talk about dogs. Why is it important to have a dog? Where do you get a dog? That kind of stuff. That's in the body of your speech. And then you have a conclusion. I think it's important to have a dog because it helps with A, B, and C. And these are the reasons why. And you give a highlight of what you talked about in the body of your presentation. So the conclusion is a summary. So introduction, body, and conclusion. It's similar to what we do when we have written communication, when we have a research paper, and we'll have more information on that soon. So the way you do written communication and the way you get ready and prepare a presentation is similar. So keep that in mind as we move through the next couple of chapters. We're going to jump into chapter 8 really quick, and I look forward to seeing you in just a bit. Go, delivering a speech. What do you do when you get to that part of you've prepared, and you're ready? How do you deliver that speech? Speaking anxiety is real. A lot of people have it. There is a TED Talk that I included in this week's material. Very helpful. Make sure you take a look at that. How do you decrease anxiety, and how do you have strategies to address the anxiety? Always important. Communication apprehension. Fear or anxiety experienced by a person due to a real or perceived communication with another person or persons. One thing to know. On page 288 and 289, public speaking anxiety is a type of CA, communication apprehension, that produces psychological and cognitive reactions in people when faced with real or imagined presentations. You would be surprised how many people get nervous, what it takes to overcome that. We're going to talk about that here in a second. So addressing it. So There's a lot of different things that we can talk about from a perspective of systematic or cognitive restructuring. So systematic may sound like something that would be done to you while strapped down in the basement of a scary hospital. It actually refers to the fact that we become less anxious about something when we're exposed to it more often. So what I've talked about is practice, and that's what this is saying. The more you practice, the better you're going to become. Cognitive entails changing the way we think about something. So thinking about public speaking in a way that's going to change our thought process and not make us as nervous. Most people get better at systematic improvement, doing it over and over and over. So moving on, how do we deliver? And this, we talked about learning objectives, speech delivery, evaluating strengths and weaknesses, and discussing strategies for making speech more effective. So impromptu and manuscript delivery, a lot of people do this differently. Not preparing and preparing, and sometimes impromptu, you don't have time to prepare. So say I'm in a big meeting with all the executives and COO calls on me to talk about something that I've been working on that I wasn't ready to talk about. You have to be able to do that, but that takes practice, right? The more you do public speaking, the easier it will be to have impromptu communication. Manuscript is when you really prepare and you have a print and written document with you so you can take a look at it and use it in a speech. You see this a lot of times when people are getting up to talk about a solution or something about maybe what you've prepared for over the last 6 to 7 months. An example would be on page 296. You see President Obama giving us a speech with a teleprompter. That's something that had manuscript delivery. He was ready, he prepared, he took time. That's an important concept, and I think most of the time we would like to have our speeches done in this fashion because it usually sounds better and you deliver it in a way that you've practiced. I also have people that can completely memorize a speech and deliver it without notes. This doesn't happen very often, but a lot of people do this. So if you do it enough, maybe it's the same speech you've done 1,000 times. It's something that you can do over and over. And then the next section entails memorizing the overall structure and the main points of a speech and deliver it in that way. So key words, key phrases. I do this sometimes. So when I talk about information, a lot of times when I'm delivering these lectures, I've read the material, I see the PowerPoint, and I can just speak on it. So that would be this type of delivery. So how do you practice your speech? This book says to notch it down into 3 different phases. Phase 1, practice like you're working through ideas and drafting your outline. Phase 2, practice for someone and give feedback. And then phase 3, put finishing touches on the speech. I think this is a really great way to practice because it gives you a different movement. So if you're in phase 1, you can look forward to the phase 2, and if you're in phase 2, you can look forward to phase 3, and if you're in phase 3, you look forward to finally delivering the speech. Talking in front of yourself, talking in front of a mirror on page 300, you see this gentleman doing that. I don't think that is super effective for me personally. What I've found is what we talked about at the beginning of the book, practicing over and over and being required to deliver speeches in front of people. That has really helped me over time become a better, public speaker, and I think it will as well for you. Now, if you still have that anxiety, doing all the techniques that they talk about in the book will be helpful. Here's the things to do. Start practicing early. Don't wait till the last minute. That's with anything and everything. Practice and really get some feedback and make changes. Time yourself. I've seen too many speeches that take way too much time. It burns the reader out. It burns the listener out, not the reader. It actually can burn the reader out too if you have an excessive amount of PowerPoints. So if there's too much information on your PowerPoint, and we'll talk about that as time goes on too. But make sure you time yourself. Don't have it too long. That's super important. That's one of the reasons these lectures are only 15 minutes. People zone out after a while. Don't only practice in front of a mirror. We talked about that. Don't over practice to get yourself super psyched up and nervous. And don't only practice in your head. It's important to practice in front of people. So we're going to move through, only a little bit left in this, rate and volume, and then pitch, how you're delivering your speech, and then also make sure you understand your facial expressions. Your eye contact is very important. All those nonverbal cues we discussed in earlier chapters. Further, making sure your posture looks good, you have gestures, you use arm and hand movements. Those are all simple things that can help deliver your speech in a better way. And also look professional. Right. Great summary of these 2 chapters. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks for your effort and your time.